it will be all sorts of fun to examine everybody's notions about alignment for this phase of Dungeons and Dragons, which would be the late 70s with the advent and perusing of the Advanced series, my topic. So if you want to go and investigate every imaginable debate about every nuance of alignment in those texts, you go right ahead. There's a whole internet for you. This is just kind of sharing the thoughts that I have about the most relevant things for the game that I'm playing right now. So the first is that, generally speaking, if you want to mash together the metaphysics and themes of J.R.R. Tolkien, in The Lord of the Rings especially, and Michael Moorcock in that particular mid-60s through the mid-70s madness of everything, right? Jerry Cornelius to Elric to the Eternal Warrior as such, and whatever else you want to pull in, Hawkwind albums, I imagine. And then also we're going to add in Poul Anderson and especially The Broken Sword, and differently, but also extremely relevant, Three Hearts and Three Lions. So I know we'll just try to pull together all the metaphysics and thematics of those things and make a thing out of it. Well, good luck to you. Perhaps a heroic task, perhaps a quixotic one, but that's what we're looking at. And what matters to me in terms of playability, first of all, is indications from their application in the text, the author's application in the texts. And in fact, it's the monster manual, rather than all of the kind of verbose descriptions of alignment that you can find in the texts. I look at the monster manual and I say, all right, then, what critters went into which thing? And various tensions about what is chaotic show up very quickly, because we have chaotic in the sense of kind of unpredictable and not particularly productive behavior. And then we also have, that would be kind of the orcish thing. And then we also have chaotic as pagan. So we have the notion of the elves and the sylvan stuff and fairy in general as a chaotic thing, which doesn't necessarily go, with that first one. We also have nature as neutral, and that, however, would be non-fairy, non-fey nature as neutral. So, if you're a bear, you're neutral. Well, you see, there's some edgy, tricky things about that. Then we trot over to lawful, and looking through the lawful evil batch, things get really interesting. Note that all of the really nasty undead, like wights and specters and stuff, those are lawful evil. And that's kind of interesting. These figures of deep horror are not the same as, the chaotic evil stuff, like vampires and things. And so that, if I remember correctly, so that is, kind of weird. You're sort of looking and saying, well, I sort of see some logic here, or maybe different sets of logic that are, coexisting. And I think the notion of neutral this or that was very much information at the time of writing that monster manual. And so distinguishing between a deeply selfish neutral evil creature, but then a lawful evil creature, which is also very self-oriented in exploiting, its status or its position in law. So what's a were-rat, being lawful evil? The whole thing becomes a little bit tricky if you're trying to make grand sense out of it. But I think in the particular, or if you take a few of the creatures that are sort of thematically related to one another and compare them, you can see vectors. It's just you're not seeing a single thing. You're seeing indications of some sense here and there in different ways. All right. So I find reading through the monster manual and looking at sets of creatures to be very provocative, interesting. Usable is a better word. Never mind interesting. Usable. I say, ooh, look. these powerful undead, lawful. Okay, well, let's place them as such and play them as such. That makes them a distinct thing. So moving on to application and play, again, directly in the moment, playing my character. What is alignment for in that regard? Hey, go off and check the internet if you want everyone arguing about it. I'm very interested in what I see in the DM guide about this. Specifically, the notion that violations of alignment, to the extent that they're actionable, that there is some sort of backlash upon you, the phrasing to me, where I focus, is the idea of consistent violation. Violation of one's alignment in a consistent way. Not here and there and once in a while, but rather that repeatedly and in a particular way, so that you may be moving toward one of the other sectors of that diagram, simply because that's the way you've been acting over and over. Then we can talk about, well, how much and, when do we basically playing the deity perhaps, or just more of a metaphysical or thematic judgment upon the play of this character to say, well, I really think you've been calling yourself chaotic good this whole time, but I'm seeing you moving, I'm seeing you be neutral good, or I'm seeing you go, perhaps in another way, instead of chaotic good, you really have been, grading more and more toward chaotic neutral. So if one could see in a character's behavior this steady and, shall we say, majoritarian approach toward who their character is, that's when I might kick in and say, all right, now let's go and consider whether there is these rules that we apply where you lose a level, or there's some backlash upon you, or some demand for correction coming from someone or something. But hold on, let's not talk about that. Let's talk instead about behavior that is not by the book. It's literally by the book. We've got player's handbook description of those alignments, and then we have much more verbose and intensive developments of those descriptions in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Okay, fine. Playing a dude. I'm playing my neutral good dude, and I've got my descriptions there, and glory be, let's pretend that I'm not an idiot. Let's pretend that I'm at least semi-literate, and I understand what those things say. And I'm reasonably good, no pun intended, I'm reasonably consistent in playing my dude accordingly. But that doesn't mean all the time. I said reasonably consistent. My dude is also not a fool or a total ideologue, and occasionally does something that, let's look from neutral good. I might on occasion do something that somebody says, that looks more like neutral, or occasionally do something that, glory be, looks kind of neutral evil. Once in a while, I'll do a thing. I did a thing, in the course of play that, is very nicely defined by neutral evil. Or on occasion, I may find myself being pretty chaotic in my goodness, or very lawful in my goodness, here and there. That's what I mean by here and there. It's not consistent, and it's not that often. We might look across, adventure after adventure and see a spot check here and there. Not much. If we were to look across the history of this character, and we would say, yeah, if we count on our fingers, we are, the majority is solidly neutral good. No point in debating this. It's clear. So what is that behavior? What is that? Is that allowed? Well, my reading is that it is not only allowed, it's standard. That's fine. I get that. And that there is no punitive mechanic that comes in. There is no sense of, playing against alignment when you did that thing that one time. That's how I read it. That's what I see. It seems very playable to me. Seems kind of fun. And of no need for trauma debate, finger pointing, you can, you can't. All that stuff just seems completely out of line with what I find readable in those rules.